After a decade of service, Carol Callahan finally returned home. There were no celebrations, no warm embraces waiting in the driveway. Instead, she found herself on a dusty couch that reeked of stale cologne, with a pillow tossed her way like an obligation fulfilled. Carol had dedicated her 20s to military service, 2 deployments to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan, serving as military police. She returned bearing the invisible and visible scars of war, a pronounced limp, a spine reinforced with metal screws, and a mind that couldn't quite find stillness. Christmas hadn't included her presence for 10 long years, and she believed this. Absence had significance. Her mother, Diane, had orchestrated the holiday meal with magazine-perfect precision. The dining room showcased polished silverware, 3 varieties of homemade pies, and a ham glazed to golden perfection. Every surface gleamed except for the hearts of those gathered around the table. Frank, her father, had barely acknowledged her arrival. He manipulated his napkin with methodical precision, his eyes refusing to meet hers. Kelsey, her 28-year-old sister, drifted through the house discussing cryptocurrency investments and a friend's Miami hot tub. Carol remained largely silent, a habit she'd developed since returning from combat. She observed the dancing flames in the fireplace and attempted to convince herself this place still felt like home. The meal commenced in that particular brand of tension only families can create. Frank distributed the mashed potatoes without lifting his gaze. Diane attacked the ham as if it had personally wronged her. Kelsey remained absorbed in her phone, chuckling at content invisible to the rest of them. Then Diane elevated her wine glass with theatrical flourish. To family, she announced, her lipstick leaving a slight smudge on the rim, and to finally, releasing ourselves from the burdens that weigh us down. The meaning struck Carol like a physical blow. Nobody looked in her direction, not even Frank. You're not a hero, Carol, Diane continued with chilling calm. You're a liability. This house no longer has space for you. Carol's fork stopped midway. To her mouth, the cranberry sauce on her plate suddenly resembled something far more sinister, thick and congealed. She waited for anyone to object, to say, "Mom, what the hell?" But they continued eating or pretending to. She placed her fork down with deliberate care. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice dangerously controlled. This composure only intensified Diane's anger. She tilted her head with mock sympathy. "You returned with nothing but medical expenses and nightmares. We walk on eggshells around your moods, and you still haven't contributed to rent." Rent? Carol blinked in confusion. She had sent money home during every deployment. "We were drowning," Diane snapped. "You have no idea what it takes to manage a household." "I do," Carol replied quietly. "Just not one where people act like I'm invisible." Frank shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. Kelsey stared at the table. Carol surveyed the people she'd sacrificed her 20s for and saw only strangers. Carol didn't respond immediately. She simply studied her mother, who had returned to slicing ham as if she hadn't just delivered a crushing blow. Kelsey resumed tapping her phone. Frank stared at his plate as if the mashed potatoes contained answers to battles he'd never fought. "You know," Carol said quietly, "I didn't return here to take anything. I came because it's Christmas. Because I thought family held meaning." "Family," Diane repeated without looking up, "means contributing your share, not sulking around with a damaged back and nightmares nobody knows how to address." Carol hadn't expected kindness or even gratitude, but she hadn't anticipated outright contempt. "Do you think I chose this body?" Carol asked. "Do you think I requested nerve damage and sleepless nights?" Diane set down the knife with a sharp click against the ceramic. "You made your decisions, Carol. You enlisted. You claimed you wanted to help us. So help us without dragging us down." Carol looked toward Frank. "Dad?" He flinched almost imperceptibly, then dropped his eyes again. The napkin in his lap had been folded into a perfect square. She turned to Kelsey. "Anything to contribute?" Her sister didn't acknowledge her, just took a long sip from her wine glass. Carol stood slowly, her legs protesting, her back flaring with pain. "I sent money every deployment," she said. "Every single one. I sent it while sleeping in tents and brushing sand from my teeth. You called crying about the mortgage. I wired it from a combat zone." Diane shrugged dismissively. "We're still behind, and your presence only makes it worse. You don't work. You don't contribute. I just left the hospital 6 weeks ago. I'm too exhausted for this," Diane muttered, collecting plates. "You're an adult, Carol. Time to stop draining us dry." Later that evening, Carol sat on the couch's edge and opened her laptop. She logged into her credit monitoring account, something she hadn't checked in months. What she discovered made her blood run cold. A loan, $22,000, taken out 6 months prior. Her name, her social security number, a co-signer, listed, Diane Callahan. The stated purpose, vehicle for rehabilitation transport. Carol didn't own a vehicle. She didn't even possess a valid driver's license anymore. She closed the laptop, her chest tightening, her face burning with rage. They hadn't just erased her, they had exploited her again. Carol packed in silence, refusing to slam doors or raise her voice. She folded her clothes with military precision, everything squared away. The loan documents she printed, along with screenshots of the co-signed forms, she slipped into a folder marked clearly, Carol Callahan, SSN ending 1194. Nobody attempted to stop her. As she zipped her duffel bag, she could hear Diane in the kitchen washing dishes. Frank was nowhere to be found. Kelsey's voice drifted from the hallway, discussing gas prices and a friend in Scottsdale. The porch light flickered once before dying as she stepped outside. She walked 3 blocks to the bus station, her damaged leg dragging, her boots pressing old pain into the ground with each step. It was approaching midnight. The town lay quiet and cold. No snow, just December's bite on bare skin. She didn't purchase a ticket home because she no longer knew where home was. Instead, she bought a one-way fare to Mason County, where her grandmother lived. Ruth Whitmore, 80 years old, wild gray hair, thick glasses, mind still sharp. Carol hadn't seen her in 6 years, not since deployment, but she remembered her voice clearly. If you ever need somewhere to breathe, come here. The bus was nearly empty. Carol sat in the back, coat pulled over her chest, folder tucked against her ribs like armor. She didn't cry, but sleep eluded her. They rolled through dark hills and past frozen fields, through towns that blinked and disappeared. When she stepped off in front of Ruth's mailbox, it was just past 5 in the morning. The sky was violet, bleeding orange at the horizon. Ruth's porch light was already on. Carol knocked softly just once. Ruth opened the door in a flannel robe, her eyes soft and unsurprised. Her gaze dropped to the duffel bag, the limp, the bruises Carol hadn't noticed but Ruth immediately saw. I knew they'd do this, Ruth said simply. Those 5 words broke something in Carol. She sank to the steps, and Ruth lowered herself beside her. She wrapped those thin arms around Carol's shoulders and held her like she was 6 again, afraid of thunderstorms and parents arguing behind closed doors. Inside, Ruth's house smelled like cinnamon and pine sap. The floors creaked in familiar places. The radiator clicked its familiar rhythm. Everything remained the same except Carol. Ruth didn't ask probing questions that night. She simply prepared the guest bed with old quilts and placed a glass of water on the nightstand. Carol slept not like someone escaping, but like someone being welcomed back in. Mornings found Carol on the porch swing with black coffee and a blanket across her knees. The soybean fields were stripped bare for winter, flat and frozen, but the horizon stretched wide. Nobody asked her for favors. Nobody hinted at disappointment. Nobody looked at her like she owed them something. This felt strange initially, being allowed to simply exist. Veterans don't learn that skill. They learn to serve, to prove, to earn their place. Stillness felt like betrayal. So Carol started writing. First, just fragments. I'd, burn pit, 24-hour fire watch, Kandahar. Then complete memories emerged. Some she hadn't touched in years. Some she'd never spoken aloud. One page simply read, they called me a burden, but I carried them for 10 years. 2 weeks into her stay with Grandma Ruth, Carol woke with something unfamiliar in her chest. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. She drove Ruth's old truck into town, fighting the clutch with her damaged left leg. At the VA clinic, a woman at the front desk looked up with tired kindness. I want help, Carol said. The woman nodded, not surprised, not moved, just like she'd heard it before and still believed it mattered. That same day, Carol met with a trauma counselor who didn't ask her to relive anything, just sat and let her speak when ready. She joined a peer group the following Tuesday. 5 veterans, 3 men, 1 woman older than Carol. One had a prosthetic. One had eyes that never stopped scanning corners. They didn't shake hands, they nodded. After Carol shared part of her story, one man leaned forward and said, "You don't owe anyone anymore. We already paid." Those words stayed with her. Later that week, Grandma Ruth entered the living room holding a long white envelope, her hands trembling but her voice firm. It's time you saw this. Inside, every letter Carol had mailed her from every deployment. Yellowing paper, sand still in the folds, envelopes, with her handwriting, sometimes smudged, always signed Love Carol. And inside each one, carefully tucked, photocopies of money orders, each matching the dates Diane claimed they never received. Enough. Ruth had even stapled printouts of bank transfers and Western Union receipts, each line highlighted. She'd kept meticulous records. While they spent her money, Ruth handed Carol an old cell phone. Voicemails, she explained, from your mother every time she called crying about bills. Carol played one. Diane's voice cracked through static. Carol, if you don't send it this week, they'll take the house. Please don't abandon us like this. The same house she now claimed Carol never helped with. The next morning, Carol met with an attorney in town, small office, quiet atmosphere. He was a veteran too, Navy. He didn't flinch when she handed him the documents. Identity theft, fraud, emotional coercion, he said. We can start with a credit freeze and proceed from there. Carol didn't want prison time. She just wanted her name back. We'll restore it. He nodded. Within a week, the VA loans department had flagged the account. Within 2 weeks, a fraud report was filed. Carol's name was cleared on paper, but the stain still felt fresh. Kelsey's name surfaced quickly in the investigation. Co-signer, her IP address, her email trail. Diane's signature wasn't just co-signed, it was forged in Carol's handwriting. The knock came the following Thursday. Diane called Ruth's landline. Carol didn't answer. The voicemail. You think you can destroy us after everything we did for you? Carol forwarded it to her lawyer. Uncle Dennis texted. This is going too far. Carol blocked him. Frank never called. But Kelsey sent a single message. I didn't know it would hurt you like this. I just needed the money. I was scared. Carol didn't respond. Some truths don't need conversation. They just need boundaries. That night, Ruth sat beside her on the porch, handing her chamomile tea. You didn't get justice, baby. You got clarity. Sometimes that's all we ever get. The air smelled like wood. Smoke. In the distance, someone's dog barked once and stopped. The stars were so numerous they pressed down like memory, and for the first time since coming home, Carol didn't feel erased. She felt real. The call came on a Tuesday late afternoon. Carol was outside splitting kindling when Ruth stepped out with the cordless phone. It's your father, she said, holding it like something fragile. Carol wiped her hands before taking it. Hi, she said flatly. A long pause. Then Frank's voice, barely above a whisper. I failed you, Carol. He said it like it had been rotting inside him for years. I kept quiet because I didn't want to lose her, he continued. But I lost you instead. Carol leaned against the shed wall. You didn't lose me, Dad. You gave me away. He didn't argue. The line went quiet except for his breathing. She could picture him at the kitchen table, napkin folded, eyes down, just like every dinner they'd shared. He cried, quiet, broken sobs in short bursts. Carol didn't join him. She just held the phone until he had nothing left. That call didn't fix anything. It didn't erase what he'd allowed, but maybe it cracked the surface of a silence she'd been drowning in her whole life. 2 days later, Kelsey sent a message. I messed up. I was scared. I was stupid. I'm sorry. Carol stared at it for a long time. The words didn't sting or soothe. They felt copied from somewhere too neat to late. She didn't reply. Some ghosts belong unanswered. That night, Carol sat with Ruth in the kitchen while she chopped apples for pie, humming the same melody she used to sing when Carol had childhood nightmares. I don't know if I'm angry or just done, Carol told her. You don't have to decide, Ruth said. You don't owe them a resolution. Carol nodded. Ruth slid the pie into the oven. Outside, wind knocked once against the pane, then moved on. Carol enrolled in online night classes using her GI Bill, cybersecurity. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent a decade guarding convoys and clearing rooms, and now she was learning to defend data instead of bodies. During the day, she worked part-time at a tractor repair shop. The owner, Jim, was ex-Air Force. The first thing he said when she walked in, we don't care about your limp. Just show up, be honest, and finish what you start. That was enough. There was no uniform, no chain of command, just wrenches, oil-stained rags, and occasional awkward silence when she froze mid-task without realizing it. Some nights she still jolted awake, heart pounding, darkness thick with old echoes. But she wasn't in barracks or on a cot. She was in a real bed under thick quilts in a room that smelled like lemon oil and laundry soap, and nobody asked her for anything. Nobody watched her eat like she was consuming resources. Nobody called her a burden. She started to believe she wasn't. One morning, just after sunrise, Carol sat on the porch swing with coffee. The soybean fields were turning green again, and the breeze carried the scent of wet earth. Grandma Ruth joined her with her own mug. She watched the fields for a long time before speaking. "You know, baby," she said, "you didn't walk away from your family. You walked toward yourself." Carol didn't answer immediately, but she smiled. For the first time in years, she believed her. Some people will never apologize the way you needed. Some debts won't be repaid. Some wounds don't close, they just stop bleeding. But healing doesn't ask for permission. It waits for you to choose yourself, and then keeps waiting. Every single day you continue to make that choice. Carol had finally come home, not to a house that had no room for her, but to a version of herself she'd almost forgotten existed. And that, she realized, was worth more than any family that had never truly seen her value. In the quiet morning light, surrounded by fields that stretched toward possibility, Carol Callahan was no longer a burden. She was free.